Well, welcome to the Seven Figure CEO podcast. This is your host, Casey Graham, and I am here today with a very bald and sexy man, Grant Grant Baldwin. How you doing, Grant?
Good, buddy. How about yourself?
Good. It's always different when you talk to people on a podcast that you don't really know, and then you talk to people that you like, you go to breakfast with or whatever, and then all that stuff. And so we're doing like the podcast thing. But I feel like we should just talk about life.
I feel like we should be doing this over a Waffle House,
yes.
Some waffles on hash browns and bacon or something.
Yes. Gosh, dude, it's good to talk to you though. And was just recently up in Nashville. They live in the Nashville area. And so, hey, tell everybody that may not know who you are listening today, who you are and just about you personally, and then a little bit about your business.
Yeah, offline, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We have 3 beautiful girls, so it's me and a house full of women, which is amazing. I absolutely love it. And so professionally, I run a training site called the Speaker Lab, where we teach speakers about the business of speaking. How do you find and book speaking engagement? So I was a professional speaker for about 8-9 years. I've done hundreds and hundreds of events, and I figured out a few things on how to book speaking engagements and how to find speaking engagements. And so, yeah, that's a lot of what we do today.
So how do you do that? What's the structure of your business?
Yeah, so we do a couple different things. The main thing that we've had for the past few years has been an online training program, an online course that teaches people basically a system for finding and booking speaking engagement. So that's been the core thing. We haven't really done much coaching up until recently. We're starting to do kind of that coupled with a group coaching program. And so I know we've talked a little bit about that here and there, and a couple of mutual friends that we've been working with on that. But yeah, so the main thing that we do is kind of 2 different programs. The DIY version of finding and booking speaking engagements, of here's the system that you need to follow. And then that coupled with a kind of a group coaching program where we can do a little bit more hand-holding and support.
So is this for people who they want to be a full-time speaker, or is this like a part-time thing, or is this like CEOs that want to get out and speak and get in front of crowds? What is the genre of the coaching?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above. The bulk of people, I would say, are people who want to be full-time professional speakers.
Okay.
And so the nutshell and kind of my background was I had done a little bit of speaking. I was a youth pastor for a minute, and then enjoyed speaking. And one of those things I felt like I was good at, wanted to do more of, had no idea where to go from there. And so I felt like I had the potential, but I needed the plan. There's a lot of people who are in a similar spot of, I spoke at my local church, I spoke at my company, I spoke at some local event. I like speaking. I want to do more of it. No idea what to do from here.
Right.
And so there's a mix of people who, yes, they want to do, something similar to what I've done in terms of they want to do 50, 60, 70, 80 gigs a year. And that's the goal. And then there's also people who, like you said, maybe like yourself, Casey, you're like, I got a good thing going. I don't want to speak 50 times a year. I'd love to do 5 things or 10 things. Right. I'm just not really sure how the things that I've got before in terms of the gigs have just been things that have fallen in my lap, have been, referrals and things with friends. And that's great when those things fall in your lap, but it's hard to build a business that way. So if I wanted to actively book gigs, what would I need to do? And so, yeah, it definitely is a mix of both.
Well, I think people listening, I think there's probably a segment of our crowd that will go, yes, I am interested in that. And there's people that would go, they're just checked out. I'm never going to do that. I run a company and it's a brick and mortar company. I don't want to speak, this, that, and the other. And so I want to talk to the people who would just discount speaking. They discount the thing and they go, that wouldn't necessarily help my business, or it's not for me, or I don't like to speak. I like, that kind of thing. What would you say? Are there real benefits, or are there some people you say, hey, you just don't need to, you're not good at it, stay out of it? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you absolutely hate speaking and if it's something that's just traumatizing for you, then you don't have to do it, in the same way that just because YouTube ads or Pinterest works for someone doesn't mean you have to do it. So one of the great things about speaking is I think oftentimes we view it very black and white, that you go speak, you get a fee, and that's kind of the end of the transaction. Right. But speaking can work really, really effectively in terms of a lead generation, especially for service-based businesses. So I'll give you a quick example. Mm-hmm. So a guy that we're working with, he runs a company up in Idaho that is specifically for home restoration. So if you had a fire or a flood or something that happened, and you needed kind of a home cleanup type of thing, they would be a company that and actually I take that back. They are a digital media agency for those types of companies in that industry, right? So he started doing more and more speaking about what it is that they do, speaking in that industry, and he's finding it's generating a ton of business for him. So a client for him may be worth thousands and thousands of dollars, but by speaking, it's building him brand awareness, it's building him recognition, it's It's giving him network opportunities. Not to mention, and you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, is that when you are kind of in an online capacity, there's only so far that relationship's going to go. But when you meet with people in person, it completely changes the dynamic. And like, as we both know, like, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And so if you're speaking in an environment of 100 people who, a percentage of them have the ability or potential to become customers or clients for you, the fact that you've built that personal connection and relationship in person with them completely changes the dynamic. So I'll give you one other quick example. There's a speaker we work with, and he speaks for free pretty frequently, but he does it strictly as lead generation for his personal coaching business. Okay. So he has last I heard, he had like $350,000 in revenue on the coaching business, but the whole thing was driven by free speaking engagements because that's lead gen for him. So for anybody, I think in most industries, whether you're selling a physical product, some type of widget, or you just have some type of service thing that you're offering, speaking is a great way to build rapport, build relationship, build connection, build authority, and also build lead gen for potential clients.
Yeah. So one other thing, and again, I've never pursued speaking as a thing. Yeah. Should just never. It's not really high on my radar. I mean, even as we're sitting here, I'm like, dang, that's good, because I was thinking about it. I did a speaking engagement for Infusionsoft at a local workshop, and they had a bunch of people come, and I just went because they asked me to go, and it was fine. We ended up hiring staff out of it.
Yeah.
And there's just something about getting out and getting out from behind the computer, getting out from behind your thing, and just getting a meeting with people, and, picking up staff, picking up clients, picking up relationships, picking up partnerships. And so there is a whole other side of benefit to speaking than just, getting on the stage. And that's something I need to wrap my head around. That's good.
Yeah. I think a lot of people like we were talking about, they think of speaking as I'm a full-time professional speaker or I'm not, I got paid or I didn't, but there's a lot of ways that you can get value from speaking beyond just, I got a check or I didn't.
That's good. Okay. Now let's transition to, let's say there's the group that's listening and they're like, okay, I am interested in this. And I am interested in being an author, a speaker, a coach, a consultant, or whatever. And I want to have a domain expertise in something, and I've got a message and I want to share it. Like, okay, they hear that. Besides buying your course, which they should, and getting your coaching, which we all agree that they should. Where do they go, by the way? We tell everybody, just like, how do they get in your world?
Yeah. So the main hub of everything is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. We have a free training that people can check out over at freespeakerworkshop.com, freespeakerworkshop.com.
Yep. Okay. So you can go there and do that. But if they're just listening, if they're just listening and they're like, okay, I want to do that. Yeah. Step one.
Yeah. So the big thing, this is the piece that if people get this right, everything else after this becomes a heck of a lot simpler. And so the main idea being that you answer three key questions is: who do you speak to? What's the problem that you solve for them, and where do those people gather? All right. So let's start with the who piece. All right. So most people are just like, I just want to speak. I just like speaking. Speaking is just a lot of fun. I'm a personal dude. I like speaking. I just want to speak to humans. Right. Well, like, that just doesn't work. Like, you've got to be really, really specific on who it is that you want to speak to. So if you're looking at this for, let's say, from a lead gen, who are those people? Who are those customers that you want to be speaking to? You can't just speak to anybody and everybody just because you enjoy that. The second piece then is, what's the problem that you solve for them?
That's a good question.
Just because you have like a cool story. This is where a lot of people think like, man, I climb Mount Everest blindfolded in my shorts, so I should be a speaker. Like just because you overcame some obstacle, just because you had some crazy life situation happen, doesn't qualify you to be a speaker. Like, the audience doesn't care what you've experienced. They don't care what you've gone through. They don't care what your story is. They want to know, what's in it for me? How does this apply to me? And so ultimately, you are in the problem solving business as an entrepreneur in general, but especially as a speaker. You got to be really, really clear about what's the problem that you're solving for that specific audience. And then the third piece is like, where do those people gather? Like, just because you want to speak to an audience and just because there's a topic that you want to talk about doesn't mean there's like any natural gatherings around that subject or topic. So the simplest place to find speaking engagements are where engagements already happen, meaning like conferences or events or churches or things where like they're already planning on bringing in a speaker. You're not trying to convince them to bring in a speaker. They're already planning on it, and you're just showing them why you're a good fit or why you're a good option. But most speakers, where they have a difficult time is those first two questions of, I want to speak to anybody. And when people ask, what do you speak about? What do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. Like, that just doesn't work. And again, this is no different than anything else in business. The more clear, the more focused, the more specific you are, the easier it is to find and book gigs.
That's good. So how do you make sure? So for instance, let's just talk about this. So I own a company called Gravy. We work with you guys, Speaker Lab, and we recover failed credit card payments for subscription-based companies. All right, let's just say I want to do this. I want to speak. And you said first question is what? It's
who do you want to speak to?
I want to speak to business owners between $500,000 in revenue and $10 million in revenue. That's who I want to speak to. Problem I want to solve. I want to help them with, how do you get, like, this is where I get stuck, okay? Because nobody cares about Gravy. Nobody cares about payment recovery. I mean, very few people wake up and go, oh man, that's sexy. That's a great topic. So like, if you're in a business that has like a niche offering or something like that, do you got to kind of go a step up to like the real problem that they're having of like, how do you create a company you could sell, or does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
the reason I'm doing this is not to find what mine is. It's if I was listening to you, I would go, okay, I get one, I get three. The problem trying to solve, like, talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's a real balance there between what you want to speak about and what the organization or the client actually cares about.
Exactly.
Just because you're like, hey, here's the thing I'm passionate about doesn't mean necessarily it's important to anybody else, right? And just because you think it should be important to someone else doesn't make it so.
Right.
So really it comes down to, like, one thing that we talk about is having the I'm drawing a blank on it. You remember in the what was the movie where they had the big rabbit?
The big rabbit.
The big rabbit where they're trying to get into the castle.
I don't know, but
the Trojan horse, basically, but it's a Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they build this huge rabbit to get into it, and it's this Trojan horse.
I'll call it a draw.
We are, exactly. We're using one thing to get into with them of what it is that they're looking for.
That's good.
So we're putting on different wrapping paper for what the thing is that we want to talk about. I'll give you an example as it relates to speaking. So several years ago, I was doing a lot of speaking in the high school market, speaking to students. And so one of the things I was passionate about was personal finance. And so I wanted to speak about personal finance. 100 out of 100 principals would tell you that teaching students about personal finance was important. But I was having a hard time getting anybody to book me for it.
Right.
What I found, though, is they were really interested in helping their students prepare for life after high school and preparing for that natural transition. So what I did was I said, hey, what if I came in and I talked about how to help your students have a successful transition from high school into college? And within that, let's talk about personal finance, right? So I was able to wrap it in a wrapping paper and do that, again, kind of Trojan horse method in a way that made sense for them. So in your situation, does anybody care about payment recovery? No, but I do care about my bottom line, and I do care about making my business more profitable, and I do care about the top line revenue.
Right.
So if you're able to help all of those things and talk about, here's 5 steps that every small business needs to take in order to make the bottom line 20% more profitable by the end of the year.
Right.
Oh, heck yeah, you have my attention. And within that context, let's talk about payment recovery, right?
That's good.
That's really kind of the way you'd want to think about it and approach it. And then one way to practically approach this is to look for other speakers who are speaking on something similar that you might be able to talk about. Because if you start browsing around, you're like, I can't find any speakers. I'm going to be the first. Like, that's not a good thing, okay? You want to find other speakers who are doing something similar because it validates. They're like, this is a market. This is a thing.
Yep.
And the other thing is, too, you want to start looking for potential events that you could speak at. So in your situation, oftentimes people are like, all right, I'm interested in speaking to small businesses. Well, even that, like, that's a huge potential market. Yeah. So what if you double down and just said, all right, I'm just going to focus on realtors or technology. Yeah. I mean, it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
But just saying, like, there's one very specific lane that I'm going to focus in. Okay, I'll give you one more example.
Yep.
So one speaker in our program speaks on social media and speaks to veterinarians, right? Now, the topic of social media, you could speak onto any type of small business, large business, enterprise, anybody, right? But by saying all we do is we focus on veterinarians. And so they are booked constantly by really doubling down on one specific niche, which also makes them a lot more referable, right?
Sure.
Because it makes it a lot easier for them to say, this social media person, this is the person because all they do is for veterinarians versus, we do it for veterinarians and we do social media and we do the, and it's just like all these things that start to spread out to the point where you're like, you can't be really doing any one thing effectively.
So we talked, when I used to work on membership sites and teach membership site stuff, we talked about niching down, and we would do an exercise called the niche tree. And we would niche. And that made sense there. I've never thought about it in the context of this. The scariest thing to do, though, is to niche down at first because
totally.
Right? Because
it's extremely counterintuitive, right? Because we feel like the more things I speak on, the more people I speak to, the more chances I have, right? But it's the total opposite, okay? One of the things that we say is you'd rather be the steakhouse than the buffet, meaning that if you and I want to go to lunch, then and we're like, man, I'm in the mood for a good steak. Do you go to the steakhouse? Like, this is all we do. If you want a burger, go down the road. If you want a taco, that's not us.
Right.
We just do steaks. Or do you go to the buffet where steak is one of 87 different things that they offer? Like, we're going to the steakhouse, right?
Yeah.
So even just the other day, we've been looking into doing YouTube ads, and we've talked with a bunch of different people who have the potential to do that, right? And there's a bunch of different platforms. You have Facebook and YouTube and Pinterest and Twitter and LinkedIn and so on and so forth. But we talked with a guy who we'll probably end up working with, and he's like, all I do is YouTube ads. All those other platforms are great. There's nothing wrong with them. All I do is YouTube ads. As a customer, I would much rather work with that guy than the guy who's like, like
I do
YouTube
that.
ads is like 10% of what we do. Like, I don't want to work with that, And the reason that Gravy is appealing for anybody who's listening is like, we do one thing.
That's it.
And we do really well. And it's really difficult, right? Like when you started it's difficult because it's like, we could do payment saving. We could also do this. And we could do upsells and downsells and all these different things you could do. But by saying, no, we just do this one thing. I know I've personally referred you a few people just because like it's a heck of a lot simpler to say, oh yeah, you got this problem. Yeah, Casey's the guy you need to talk to about this. By focusing on the one thing.
Yeah, this applies to all business. This applies to all products. This applies to all things. But this really is good for getting, not only if you're not even a speaker, but just even like what you do a webinar on, or how you approach the market, or what your ads are, or any of that kind of stuff. And Stu McLaren, you know Stu, right?
Right. Yeah.
He always talks about one of the things is just in marketing is just make sure you're known for something.
Totally.
Just something like. When you think Stu, you think membership. When you think Grant, you think speaking.
Exactly.
When I think Brian Harris, I think list building. When I go down these different things, that's really good. This is good. Okay, so let's talk about those are the high level. All right, cool. I got those nailed. What do I do now? Literally, do I go email conference organizers and say, hey, I want to speak at the event? Because I would perceive that to be like they don't want some guy emailing them that is starting out speaking to be at their event. Do you shoot for a main stage, a breakout, and again, we don't have to do your whole course here, but I'm just trying to get down to like the nuts and bolts.
Now what? Yeah,
you got it.
Yeah.
So what would you do?
The mistake that a lot of speakers make, though, is, all right, let's say I'm really clear who I want to speak to. I'm really clear on the problem that I solve. I'm really clear on where these people gather.
Right.
And I put up a website. I have my demo video. I've got those pieces ready. The mistake that then speakers make is like, I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. Like I just hope people magically find out about me, right?
Sure.
I want to be in the payment saving business. So I'm gonna put up a website and just sit back and hopefully it all works out. The reason that you've had some success, the reason that you've built Gravy is because you've made calls, that you've knocked on doors, that you've stayed after it, right? Now, once you start doing that, speaking is no different than any other business. It's very much a momentum business. And once you get it going, it's hard to get going at the beginning, but once you get it going, it's like a flywheel. It's like pushing that boulder downhill. Like it's a heck of a lot easier to get gigs as you continue to go. So going back to what do I do at this point? So you can do a couple different things. One would be to let people know in your space that you are speaking, that you are a speaker. If someone says, hey, I'm looking for someone who can speak in a technology about profit, profit. I was like, I don't know. Does Casey do this? I'm not sure if he does this because I don't know. Is he speaking much, right? But if you are actively speaking and you're letting people know you're a speaker, it's a lot easier for you to become top of mind to think of, for people to think of you. So that would be a really important thing. The other thing I would say is going back to what you talked about, is you can absolutely reach out to potential conferences and conventions, events, organizations who are looking for a speaker. Because again, you're providing a solution to a need that they already have. You're not trying to convince them to hire a speaker. They're already planning on hiring a speaker. You're just showing them why you are a good fit or why you're a good option. And so the mistake that a lot of speakers make, though, is, all right, I'm clear on all this stuff. And so now let's say I'm going to send some type of outreach email. We send like this 98 paragraph email about like, here's why I'm so awesome. You should hire me. Let me tell you my life story. Here's my bio. Here's a bunch of links. Here's a bunch of videos you'll never watch. I'm going to send you my book too. Like nobody wants to do that. I mean, think of it like think of it like a first date. All you're trying, that very first introduction, all you're trying to do is get a reply. I'm not trying to book a gig. I'm not trying to close a deal. I'm just trying to get a reply. I'm trying to get some conversation going because no client's going to be like, man, I just got this email and I'm ready to book you right now. Like you and I talked about Gravy for months before we did anything, right? Yeah. I was just kind we're just putting it out there, starting the relationship. Yeah, starting a conversation. And that's the goal. And so another way to think about this is a lot of speaking, a lot of business, again, in general, is planting seeds versus harvesting. We like the harvesting part. Sure. That's the fun part. I got fruit, I got vegetables, I got stuff I'm picking and pulling in. That's the fun part. But none of that stuff happens if you're not planting seeds. And the seed planting is like, it's boring, it's repetitive, it's monotonous, it's tedious, it's lame. Nobody wants to do it, right? But if you want to pick fruit in 3 months, 6 months, a year, you got to start planting seeds right now. And so that means that you may be sending an email, that you're building a relationship, that you're reaching out, that you're letting people know in your network that you're available to speak, that you're talking with that friend of yours who just spoke at a conference that you would be a good fit for, seeing if they can make an introduction to whoever the event planner is. You're doing these little touch points here to begin to plant seeds to build those relationships. And then things start to grow. Things start to happen. And again, once you're speaking, it's a lot easier for, again, referral, repeat, building relationships with other speakers. A lot of things start to naturally take place then. But at the beginning, it's just a lot of planting seeds. And that can come down to sometimes just sending an email and reaching out to potential clients.
That's good. Okay, cool. Now let's do just a little rapid fire with everybody. Let's just say you have high level, we've done these things, and obviously you're going to need much more detail. That's why you got to jump into speakerlab.com. That's right? Speakerlab.com.
Speakerlab.com.
Speakerlab
will take you to some speaker radio company up in Seattle. So.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, the
there you go.
Speakerlab.com. You got to get all that. Get that. Jump in if you're interested in this. Obviously, there's so much more depth and detail and stuff. This is the high level. But if somebody's on a stage, if somebody is speaking, whether it be down the street at a local event or they're speaking in front of 5,000 people, what are you're there, you are speaking, some things you're just like, hey, here's some things you should absolutely do. Just a couple, like 3, you must do these kind of things.
Yeah, one of the best things that you can do in terms of just giving a good presentation is just making sure that you are really well prepared. The best speakers on the planet don't just show up and wing it. They're not just like, just going to make it up and then write down a couple of bullet points on a napkin and go up there and we'll make it up as we go. Like the best speakers in the world, they've spent hours and hours in practicing, but they practice so much that it makes it look like they're just natural, that they're just coming up with it. Mm-hmm. But that, as I promise you, it's a lot of work that's happened behind the scenes. That's the biggest thing, the biggest leverage point that speakers can do in terms of just getting better. The other thing just to remember is that especially if you're wanting to speak more often and you're wanting to really take speaking seriously, your best marketing is just showing up and doing a great job. It's your talk itself. So if you're sitting in an audience and you see a speaker that's just amazing and you're looking for a speaker, boy, it's a heck of a lot simpler to be like, I just saw that person in person and they were amazing. I want to hire this person. I want to work with this person versus just like, I got an email from someone or I'm just taking someone else's word for it. Like you really want to, if you can see that person, the better. And so from a speaking perspective, the better quality talk you can give, it's no different than like, again, let's go back to the restaurant analogy. If there's a new taco place in town that my wife and I like to go to, that I've got a bunch of friends to go to, the reason we like going there isn't because of the menu, isn't because they did any slick marketing, isn't because like some Instagram campaign. It's because the tacos are freaking amazing, right? Yeah. So it makes me want to tell other people about it because the product itself is good. The things that you recommend, the things that you talk about, the things that you love, it's because the product or service is just so dang good. So the same thing is true as a speaker. Your best marketing tool is just showing up and doing a great talk.
Right. Okay. But when you're on the stage, just a couple of tips, just like, I know you can't teach everybody how to be a great speaker in, 2 minutes, but what are just some, if you're speaking for lead gen or you're speaking for business or you're speaking for, a reaction of some kind, or any things you would recommend?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is use a lot of stories. Stories are things that people always connect with, people always relate with. I always recommend using first-person stories that you've actually experienced and lived. I mean, you can say like, once upon a time, let me tell you about this story from the Civil War. And most people are like, it's kind of interesting, but it was a long time ago, But if you're like, let me tell you about this story that happened in my business recently, or here's a situation that happened with a client that we were working with. Even if you watch this, this is very interesting. Do this next time you're speaking.
Okay.
Start with, hey, I have a story. Let me tell you a quick story. And people you'll watch the audience and they'll be like on their phone or not paying attention, and then they'll perk up. It's a story, right? I don't know where it's going. I don't know what it is. I have no idea what this is going to be about. Is this going to be funny? Is this going to be serious? Is this going to be sad? Is this going to be lame? Yeah. I have no idea, but it's a story, and people are captivated by stories.
That's good.
So using stories is really, really valuable. The other thing too is it's just very relatable. So when I speak, I'll tell stories about meeting my wife. I'll tell stories about skydiving. I'll tell stories about going to Disney World with my daughters. Like just these kind of like random first person stories that like human beings can relate to. You are one human talking to another group of humans. So stories can be really, really powerful and effective. The other thing I would remind speakers is that don't feel like it's this us versus them mentality, right? Sometimes we feel like the audience is there because they want us to fail, or they're waiting for us to bomb, or we're worried we're going to mess up. Like, again, you're a human talking to a collection of other humans. So the more human you can be, the better. So stop trying to be so robotic. Stop trying to be so deep in your head of, I'm supposed to say this, and then I take 5 steps over, and then I raise my right hand, and I make this. Like, have you ever seen a speaker like that? Where you're like, golly, you're just going through the motions.
It's scripted.
It is. It's raw. It's just brutal. Like you just want someone that just feels totally present and engaged with the audience. And so how do you feel more comfortable, more engaged with the audience? A lot of it comes back to what we talked about earlier of just being more prepared. The more time you spend on the presentation and the talk, the more comfortable you feel. You show up, I'm ready, I'm good, I got it, give me the mic, let's go, versus like, oh gosh, I just thought about this 30 seconds ago and now I'm going to try to make it up. Like you probably are going to feel nervous, you probably are going to feel anxious. So again, being prepared, using stories, being a human on stage, not being so robotic, like those little things start to make a difference.
That's good. And I even noticed that you've done that now that I look back on the podcast. I'd be like, so tell me the 3 things, and you say 1, 2, 3. Now let me tell you a story about number 1, or let me tell you a story about number 2. And those things are the things that connect. So that's really good.
You want, whether we want to admit it or not, a week from now, people aren't going to remember 99% of what we talk about here. But they'll remember a story. I remember that one story you told about this one thing, or I remember what was the steakhouse buffet thing,
or the rabbit.
Yeah, like whatever. Next time they're watching Monty Python, they're going to remember the Trojan horse and the Trojan rabbit or whatever it was. But there's those little things. Those are the things that people will latch onto in their heads.
That's good. So for everybody listening, tell everybody where to find you. Obviously, that's your website. How do they connect with you? Like, what's the best steps for them to take with you? Just to tell them like the thing to do.
Yeah. So thespeakerlab.com is where people can check that out. We've got a podcast as well. At this point, we've got at the time of the recording, like 180, 190 episodes. So I know people who are listening to podcasts like finding good podcasts. So definitely check that out. And then again, check out freespeakerworkshop.com, freespeakerworkshop.com. We walk through just a step-by-step training there on how to find and book speaking engagements. So just taking what we've talked about here and digging in a little bit more.
That's awesome. We know there's a lot of people wanting it because you are a 7-figure CEO. So there's a lot of people that want to do this. And man, it's great to connect. Great to even hear your story in this thing. And dude, thanks for what you do. You get a lot of good messages out. We appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the friendship we've built, and appreciate what you do. I'm not just a subscriber to the podcast. I listen to it, and I'm a fan of what you guys do. Okay.
Well, Grant, thanks so much for being here, and thank you guys for listening. This has been a great podcast. I'd love for you to email me, Casey@allgravy, allgravy.io. Put Grant's name in the subject line. Just put Grant Baldwin or just Grant, and I would love any feedback or questions you have. If we can connect you to Grant's thing, if there's anything you take away and say, this was awesome, thanks for this, or if there's any other recommendations or people you want us to have on the show, let us know. We would love to. So, Grant, thanks for being here, and thank you guys for listening to the 7-Figure CEO podcast.